Last year at the march, we had almost 5,000 Pennsylvanians join us, and we're so excited in a little over a week that we're going to have thousands more Pennsylvanians joining us there. So we have some exciting things to talk about as we prepare for the march, and I think we're going to cover some of why this is important. And if you're kind of on the fence, or you have friends who are on the fence about attending, this is a great way to get out the word and share more about why we do this march. I know that last year, the Pennsylvania March for Life was actually the first ever March for Life I'd done. I hadn't been to a national one, I hadn't been to a state one, and it was so powerful in ways that I was not even anticipating. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that today, and are excited for everyone to join us. So I have with me today Michael Geer, who's the president of the Pennsylvania Family Institute. He's been doing really important advocacy work for life and families in our Commonwealth for over 3 decades. And I also have Erin Getz from the National March for Life group, who plays such a big role in making this happen, both at the state level and at the national level. So to kick things off, Erin, can you give us a little bit of background about why you're involved in the movement and what that journey's been like for you?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Alexis. Can you hear me all right? Great. So thank you for having me, and thanks everyone for joining on the webinar today. I'm so excited for the second annual Pennsylvania March for Life. And like Alexis said, I'd love to start and tell you a little bit about myself and kind of the journey I've had to coming to working in the pro-life movement, because it didn't start in a normal way for many pro-lifers. My story kind of begins, I was raised in a Christian Catholic household, but never really thought about abortion and what that was, what it meant, until I went to college. And when I was there, I was surrounded by many pro-abortion peers. I don't think I knew a single pro-life peer or student while I was in university. And during my time there, I slowly started to have this conversion of faith, and this newfound faith that I had really made me question my views on abortion, because I was so pro-abortion, being surrounded by a lot of that kind of propaganda, seeing the lies that the abortion industry sells us, that a baby is just a clump of cells, and just not actually informing the public on what is really going on and the real harm that's being done to women. So slowly, as I come through this conversion, I start to realize I need to do some research on this. I need to really figure out, why I believe what I do on abortion, and see if I'm wrong. And so I did that research. I looked into resources at, Susan B. Anthony list, some of the resources, March for Life, some state resources. But the most impactful for me was actually watching the videos that I'm sure many of you have seen, that Live Action has done to kind of do a cartoon version of showing what an abortion actually is, so that people have an understanding of what they're actually supporting. And I'm sure some of you have seen that once people see those videos, they change their mind. And I'm one of those people that changed my mind when I saw the videos. It started by seeing what a late-term abortion was, and then slowly I started to realize that, wow, life does begin at conception. And I determined at that point, okay, well, if life begins at conception, I have to start standing for life when life begins at conception. So from there, I grew in a lot of fervor for the pro-life movement. I just was so blown away that I had been so blatantly lied to by mainstream media, by the abortion industry. And I just wanted people to wake up and to realize what it really was that they're being sold, and the harm that's being done to women. And so I slowly grew in this passion, and I realized that I really wanted to be working in the pro-life movement. And some of my background, when I was in college, I had the unique pleasure of working at the State House in New Hampshire, in Concord, and really loved it, and realized how important it is to engage at the state level with your state representatives and senators on the issues we care most about. And one of those issues obviously being abortion. And so as I realized this, and, my passion was growing, a position at the March for Life to lead their state march program was opened. And the Lord is good and brought me to that. And I've been in this position for a little over a year now, and it's just been such a blessing to bring those two passions of state advocacy and my pro-life passion into one job, and getting to work with amazing groups across states like PFI. And I'm thrilled for this Pennsylvania March for Life, especially because it's the first state march in a post-Roe America, which is just an answer to prayer. Beautiful. I'm so excited. And so I thought maybe I'd continue a little bit and kind of talk about what it means from the national perspective to be doing these state marches and why it's so important. Obviously, in that overturn of Roe versus Wade, a long-awaited day that happened in such a historic moment, the power to decide abortion law returned to the states. And now the state and the federal government have latitude in terms of how they decide abortion law. So it's still going to be talked about in Congress here in Washington, D.C., but the states have greater latitude to make those laws happen. And so it's more important now, more than ever, to use our voices in our state capitals to make sure that our legislators hear us and know that we want life-affirming policies to be enacted. And I mean, you can just see the way that it has already had impacts in our state marches that we've had over the past couple of years. I know that, I mean, as Alexis mentioned, last year we had well near 5,000 marchers in Harrisburg, and it even was noticed by Governor Wolf, who tweeted and said that it was an anti-women's march, which I'm not sure if he could see very well in the crowd, but it was mostly women, and there was mostly women on the stage. So I'd like to fact check him a little bit on that. And even so, earlier this year, we had the first ever Connecticut March for Life, and Connecticut is my home state. So I was very excited to be there. And Connecticut's quite a bit smaller than Pennsylvania, but we still drew large numbers to Hartford, Connecticut, around 3,000 marchers. And we were so joyful and loud that the cheers echoed in the House and Senate chambers and just rattled pro-abortion legislators. They had no idea what was going on. Their heads were peeking out of the windows, knowing what the crowd was. And for them to realize that we were there standing for life, I really shook them. And it affirmed that we're not here to mess around. We're here to stand for life. And it's not something we're going to back down from. And I'm just so thrilled that we're getting to do this again in Harrisburg. And I think it's going to be a beautiful day. And I know that we're going to have great numbers and a beautiful, joyful witness to life. So thanks, Alexis.
Wow, Erin, I love, first of all, you made so many great points. And first of all, though, I just love your story. And I feel like it's so important for people to hear, because it feels like this has always been a contentious issue, as we all know, but especially post-Roe, there can be this feeling of hopelessness of no one is ever going to change their mind on everything. And it's just kind of, there's not a lot that we can do. And that's such a great reminder that there is so much that we can do. And God is obviously still changing hearts and minds and is definitely at work. So that's just so exciting. And not just that pivot that you made in your own personal life, but now you are making such a big difference at the state and national level. So that's so exciting. And I think also, I love hearing your story in Connecticut. And I think we had a similar story in Pennsylvania too, where we had a legislator tell us that this was the largest group she had seen outside the Capitol ever in her entire time there. And so we are definitely making a big impact. And it's making a statement that lawmakers just cannot ignore. And it's true. It's a truthful reflection that we in Pennsylvania, we are a pro-life Commonwealth, and we support the sanctity of life. And so I think that's really powerful. But as I mentioned earlier, Michael, you have been working in Pennsylvania for longer than I've been alive and involved in this advocacy. And so you have a great perspective in that. So can you share a little bit with us about what the landscape in Pennsylvania looks like for life as we go into the march?
Well, I'm happy to do that. And as we started Pennsylvania Family Institute back in 1989, that was right around the time that the Abortion Control Act Pennsylvania's pro-life law that was passed in 1989. We got involved at the tail end of that, actually focused on the family, partnered with us to help encourage people to contact their legislators, because it was a touch and go time period as to whether that was going to get out of both the House and the Senate at that time, and eventually was signed into law. And that law still remains on the books here in Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvania Abortion Control Act, which includes a 24-hour waiting period, a parental notification part of it, parental consent, and then informed consent for the mom, and as well as then a ban on abortions after 24 weeks. Now, at the time that the Abortion Control Act was passed in Pennsylvania, that was about all that the Roe versus Wade abortion decision would allow, and we thought we were really pressing the envelope even at that point to do that. A ban at 24 weeks. Think about that. That's 6 months old, a baby inside the womb. So we're still talking late-term abortions. That's about all that was allowed. And Planned Parenthood filed a lawsuit against that law. We thought might result in the overturn of Roe versus Wade back in 1991-92, when that was before the courts. And Planned Parenthood, the same MO as they have now. They're always attacking any and every attempt to protect unborn life and to protect the moms that are carrying those babies. The Supreme Court, unfortunately, did not overturn Roe versus Wade at that time, but did uphold most of that law. And that has been on the books and was a life-saving and is a life-saving law. Whether you look at the numbers of abortions that took place in Pennsylvania back at that time, back in the late 80s, early 90s, it was about 60,000 a year. That number has dropped down to about 30,000 a year is what the state records. So that's a significant impact. And even as you know, Lexi, we've witnessed here at Pennsylvania Family Institute, that 24-hour waiting period allows a young girl or a woman who's being coerced into an abortion, which is illegal, to find and seek help before someone forces her to get that abortion. And our Independence Law Center, our attorneys here, Jeremy and Randy and the others on our team, have been able to save the lives of unborn babies because their moms didn't want abortions that someone was trying to force them to get. And that gave us time to get to the courts, to get involved, to make a difference and stop those abortions. So laws like that, even though they don't save all human life through abortion, have been vitally important. We're glad that it's still on the books here in Pennsylvania, but certainly more needs to be done. And as we see the overturn of Roe versus Wade, now there is more opportunity to protect human life and to protect the women that are being challenged by abortion and by an industry that simply wants their money and wants to take the lives of their child and provides no real counseling both before or after the fact. So that's the situation in terms of the law here in Pennsylvania. Now, there have been numerous other laws or several other laws that have passed since then and that are on the books. You might remember the Kermit Gosnell abortion clinics scandal, which we'll be talking about because of who our speakers are at the March for Life. After that scandal out of West Philadelphia with an egregious, terrible abortion facility where women were being murdered, being killed, basically dying from the botched procedures. Countless babies who were killed after they were born alive, late-term babies happening at this abortion clinic without state oversight, without inspections. And as a result of that, the exposure of that, a law was passed. We helped to get a law passed that requires unannounced inspections on abortion clinics in Pennsylvania. Those inspections also then health and safety regulations. When the Kermit Gosnell scandal happened, the district attorney of Philadelphia at the time said that there was more regulation in Pennsylvania on nail clinics and massage centers and hair salons than there were on abortion clinics. And yet we know just how dangerous that can be, what a terrible procedure it is, and they were not being regulated at all. Since then, as a result of the passage of that law, I think the number now is up to 9 abortion clinics that have closed as a result of that. And that, again, is protecting the health and safety of women and ultimately protecting babies. But we need to do more. Right now, there's a case before the Pennsylvania Supreme Court that Planned Parenthood and abortion clinics in Pennsylvania have filed a court case suing Pennsylvania, asking for taxpayer funding of abortion, that the court would order that all of us taxpayers in Pennsylvania would pay for the abortions that take place in our state. And then also this court case is seeking that the court would declare or find or invent, is really the right word for it, a right to abortion in our Constitution. And if they do that, that puts Pennsylvania in a worse place than even when Roe versus Wade was in place. So we're working towards a constitutional amendment to fix that. We're waiting for that court decision to come down to really press forward in a concerted way to get this constitutional amendment passed. But we're already on the road to that. The legislature earlier this year passed that through the House and Senate. And we're excited about and thankful for them doing that work in the first stage of getting a constitutional amendment to protect life in Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Michael. And I'd like to point out that our Director of Communications, Dan Barkowiak, has put a link in the chat if you'd like to take action or learn more about that life amendment and the steps that our legislature is taking. But, you know, I think one thing you said really stood out to me, Michael, is just how passing just basic health and safety regulations closed down 9 abortion clinics. I mean, you know, we know this, but I think that shows more than anything that this is an industry that is putting profits over women, and they're obviously cutting corners that affect people's lives. It's literally life or death situations. And so the fact that they couldn't even keep up to these very basic regulations, I think is so telling. And the fact that now they're trying to circumvent the legislature to get these protections overturned is really something that shows their true colors. And I think it's something that every Pennsylvanian should be concerned about, and reason even more that we really need to gather together as a pro-life community and send a message. But another thing that you hit on, Michael, that I'd like to talk with you more about is Gosnell, the reason that we have that, and also who our keynote speaker is, Ann McElhinney. Can you give us a little bit of background on that story and, you know, what we can expect from her as our speaker?
It was in early 2011 that the district attorney of Philadelphia released a grand jury report outlining the wrongdoing that had taken place at this West Philadelphia clinic run by Dr. Kermit Gosnell, an abortionist. The investigation started with him because it appeared and he was suspected of being sort of a pill mill, a place where they were providing opiate drugs to people in the community and just selling drugs there in West Philadelphia. And that's where the inspection started. When the police officers went in to inspect, they found they didn't even realize it was an abortion clinic. They found baby body parts in there. They found unbelievable gross conditions in there, and discovered then and in talking with and interviewing people that work there, the deaths of women that had taken place there. We had even a state legislator from former state legislator from the Philadelphia area's cousin was died as a result of a botched abortion at that clinic. And as the grand jury report mentioned, there were countless babies who were born alive, late-term babies who the process that Dr. Gosnell, and I'm sorry to even talk about this, but people need to know what the abortion industry is like. It was a process he called snipping, which these babies were born alive, and then he would take scissors and cut their spinal cord to kill them after birth. This is the kind of heartlessness of the abortion industry. Every abortion takes the life of an unborn human child. There's no question about that. And the gruesomeness of that, though, was one that should have caught national attention. There was a blip on the radar screen, and then next thing you know, the mainstream media did not cover it. There was a trial that took place there. There's a famous picture that was taken of empty seats in that courtroom that had been reserved for the press, and there was no one except for one reporter from a local newspaper that was there covering that trial. That picture went viral on the internet and caused people to realize, you know what, there's a cover-up going on here. People don't want the mainstream media and others want to hide the gruesomeness of the abortion industry. And one of the people that ended up coming to that trial was Ann McElhinney and her husband, who were reporters. They had, done documentaries on things like fracking and other sorts of issues. And they just happened to hear about this story, saw that picture of the empty courtroom, went there and started watching the trial. And Ann has a testimony, not all that dissimilar to Erin's, in that she was not pro-life. But when she witnessed and heard the testimony in that hearing, or in that trial, she was appalled, number one, at what abortion was really like, because she came face to face with it. Number two, she was appalled that the state, the government, the Rendell and Ridge administrations did nothing to protect women or to protect these babies or to even just protect simple human decency and health. And so out of that, she developed a pro-life conviction and said, this is a story that needs to be told. She wrote a book, a best-selling book about that, Gosnell, America's Most Prolific Serial Killer, I think is the name of that book, and then produced a movie following that tells the story with some significant actors. And again, she was kind of blacklisted for trying to produce that movie and get it distributed, but thankfully it did make it to the big screen and is still something that people can watch and I think and screen. So we're excited because she has agreed to come and be the keynote speaker at our March for Life. And that's what we really want to talk about. People, we're talking about serious issues here, and this is a serious issue, the sanctity of life, which is why we need a huge turnout to keep the momentum for the sanctity of life. And Ann McElhinney, the author of that book, wonderful speaker. She's originally from Ireland, so people will just enjoy hearing her accent, much less anything else. But when she tells the story, it is so compelling and so convicting to all of us to say we need to be more involved to protect these lives, to protect these women, and to be involved in advancing the cause of life.
What a powerful story. And, I think it's wonderful how what started out supposing, in darkness, trying to cover things up and shut things down, that just exposing that has shed so much light on this issue. And, Ann and her husband may not have even come if the courtroom wasn't empty like that. And so it's just wonderful what light does to situations like this and how important it is to shed light and bring truth to these conversations when so often it can be lacking. So one other thing I want to talk about before we get to some details that might interest people, but this is both for Erin and Michael. But I know you're both aware of this, and I was also recently at the hearing itself. So in Pennsylvania, we have a Democratic Policy Committee, and they held a hearing really just slandering pregnancy resource centers and pregnancy care centers without even having any of these centers there. And it was really so discouraging and kind of shocking to be there and watch and hear some of the questions they asked, some of the conclusions they came to. And, for those who may not be aware, these are centers that outnumber abortion clinics 9-to-1 in Pennsylvania, and they provide millions of dollars to tens of thousands of Pennsylvanians, giving them diapers, classes, resources, even helping out with rents, all these kinds of things. And yet they were being vilified because they don't fit into the abortion industry's narrative of what the pro-life movement is. And so I think, we also will have our MC at the event is Amy Shearing, and she's a pregnancy care director. So, Michael or Erin, can you talk a little bit about what pregnancy care centers are for our movement, and even some of the recent attacks that have come upon them, and why that all means that it's important now more than ever for us to attend the march?
I guess I can just start with the pregnancy care centers. When people ask us at state marches, at the national march, okay, what can I do next? What can I do now? Because a lot of people get the energy from coming to the March for Life. It's a beautiful day, it's a witness, but they want to take that energy home. And so much of what they can do at home is supporting these pregnancy care centers, because they're actually providing the option to choose life to women who are in crisis pregnancy. So when people say that they're pro-choice, they're not really pro-choice, they're pro-choose abortion. They're what pro-life centers are doing, what pregnancy care centers are doing, are giving women the real option to choose life, to be pro-life, and they're giving them the sustainable resources that they need in order to do that. And that does look like diapers, baby clothes, different toys, cribs, helping with rent, helping with medical bills, making sure that they have parenting classes, all of those types of things, real tools that are going to help these mothers and give them community so that they feel confident in choosing life. So often we need to focus on the mother, because if the mother feels loved, if the mother feels supported, and that she knows that she has the resources and the back support to choose life, she's going to choose life for that child. And that's exactly what these pro-life pregnancy care centers are doing, is giving mothers that support and that real option to choose life. And I'm sure Michael can speak a little bit more into it as well.
No, I think that's absolutely right. And so many of these centers have gone what they say have become medical centers in terms of providing ultrasound capability for the women who come in, which is vitally helpful, important to let them know where the baby, where the baby is in the gestational period and all of those sorts of things, but also even in terms of the health protection of the women, because the potential for an ectopic pregnancy, for example, where the baby is actually starting to grow in the fallopian tube in a place that's not where it's supposed to be and can cause a real serious injury. And to be able to identify that and then get medical help for those women who come in there is vitally important, and something that, with the abortion industry doing this telemed and sending abortion pills, or just having women come in and get these pills without checking to see if this is an issue, is just one facet of why pregnancy resource centers are such a vital resource, vital benefit for the women of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and nationally, and why the abortion industry is trying to stamp them out. I mean, the fact is, as you said, Erin, they're not about choice. They're really about promoting abortion, pushing abortion, because it's a moneymaker for them. And I hate to think even more nefariously about them, but the notion of abortion is all about embracing death ultimately. And anytime a woman goes into an abortion facility, it's two people going in there, and it's one that leaves and the other is dead. And we can never forget that reality about the abortion facilities. Conversely, those of us who have visited pregnancy resource centers know just the beautiful spirit that exists in those places, the desire to help, the desire to love, the desire to embrace. And when you talk to people who've done sidewalk counseling outside abortion clinics, or you talk to people who have done, women who have had abortions and talk about, their regret, one of the things they tell you is, if I only knew there was someone who would help me, or someone who just said, we can help. Well, there are plenty of people, as Lexi, you said, the number of pregnancy resource centers in Pennsylvania outnumbers abortion clinics 9-1. And if you think about the people that are supporting the pregnancy resource centers, then you think about that number of people, of the hundreds of people that are behind the different centers, each center having people who are volunteering, people who are giving money, people who are serving in so many different ways. Those are all people who are raising their hands saying, I will help. And that's one of the best parts of the pro-life movement, which is why the abortion industry and the politicians that back it want to shut down these centers, and why those hearings took place in Harrisburg. Thankfully, here in Pennsylvania, the pro-life pregnancy resource centers are not taking that